Hey, welcome back to the series, everybody. Today we're talking and tackling a topic that's really near and dear to my heart. And let's be honest, it's kind of the bane of everybody in sales training or just training generally. Getting people to remember what they've learned, or what we like to call it, beating that forgetting curve of doom. Like, people forget stuff but seriously, really, the most valuable knowledge isn't what's taught, it's what's remembered and applied. That's where the actual training comes into play. So the most valuable knowledge is what's remembered. So let's dive in. I've been in sales training for quite some time, and we've got fresh-faced new sellers. We've got department veterans and everybody in between. And here's the big question we get all the time. Pierre, how do we make training stick? And how do we know it's actually working? Well, that's just a great question. And that's what I'm here to talk about, some ideas on how we can implement some metrics and some training stickiness programs, so to speak, and measure it in real time and in the real kind of world. How do we measure this stuff? So first, let's be real. Modern sales teams are like the United Nations. They are a diverse backgrounds of people, different experience levels, and varying learning styles. You've got folks with no formal education sitting next to MBA graduates and engineers, all learning the same exact material. Then you had the fact that some of our people are native English speakers, while others are tackling the content in their second or third language. So talk about a challenge, right? Now, one size does not fit all. So here's a few practical ways that I like to use to help the content stick, and more importantly, turn it into real world behaviors, because that's at the end of the day what we're really looking to do. It's not so much teaching the head knowledge, but creating behavior changes in folks. And so first up, let's teach with a plan. I know that sounds super obvious, but you'd be surprised how often this happens. We need clear objectives of what the goal of the session is. What do we want our sellers to walk away with, knowing or being able to do? Whether that's a little 15-minute refresher or a full-blown workshop, having clear outcomes makes the world of selling and getting that impact, that makes the world of difference for us. Now, before we even step into the classroom or Zoom or Teams meeting, what we want to do is make sure we've drafted up a learning objective. Some pretty simple stuff. What are the key takeaways? And here's the pro tip. Review those objectives with stakeholders ahead of time. Get that alignment so you're not just talking at your team, but with the team. You're not just telling them what to do, but you've got an alignment with leadership, with your frontline managers, and we kind of know what we're expecting out of folks. And this gives us a chance to really make sure we land the message appropriately, having other ears on it and other eyes on it. Now, remember, the classroom is only the first part of training, right? That leads me to the second point, which is train with hands-on. We've got to give people opportunities to practice. What kind of skill would we do if we were chemists and only learned out of books, or scientists or doctors or equipment repair people if we just learned from the manuals? We wouldn't be very effective at it. We just wouldn't know how to do the things in the right order. We might see pictures or watch videos, but we kind of have to learn by doing. And that's something that salespeople love to do, which is do stuff. They don't like the classroom as much as you think. Classroom learning is great, but without hands-on practice, it's like someone teaching someone to swim from a PowerPoint presentation. It just doesn't work. Training should be a two-part process. After the classroom, or after your kind of manager review or whatever you're doing to introduce the idea, it's time for that field application to get the team working through the real world scenario, practicing the skills they've learned and giving feedback. Now, this way, they're not just remembering the content, they're using it. And it's also a great confidence booster. And what they say, confidence sells. So make the learning fun. Let's talk about how we can do that. How can we engage in interactive training with folks? And that does a wonder for retention. There is a certain part, I've worked with a lot of PhD folks that are adult education specialists, and we have to kind of touch a lot of different parts of the brain when we do this. We want to engage their mind, and that's that training stuff that we're doing, kind of black and white. Here's the thing we need you to learn. Here's what we need you to do. Here's the outcome. Here's how you do it, showing. But the next part is getting that hands-on. So with sellers specifically, we've just found that gamification is a big one here. Create competitions, assign badges, build a leaderboard, anything to get that kind of competitive spirit going. Heck, give them homework and make it interesting. Throw up some dashboards or sales simulators or interactive tools to keep them hooked in and keep them going. And this helps just not you, but it also helps them encourage one another in a fun way. Now, part of it is the culture, but you're going to want to reinforce this. I recently had a great example of a company that taught all their sellers how to enhance their LinkedIn profile and leverage LinkedIn better for business-to-business selling. And 3 weeks later, when they did the check-in with the sellers, nothing. No one had done anything. And nobody had kept track of this thing, and they had invested in training on how to get in, and nobody had done anything. Just a really good example of the head knowledge versus the heart knowledge, that we need to actually put this work in action. So if anybody gives you grief about homework, just tell them it's practice for the best. It's practice for the best. It's practice, perfect practice. So you can't argue with that. Creating that, being a leader often means putting in the work in education. Beating the forgetting curve. This is how we do that. Now let's get into the nemesis of training, that forgetting curve like we were talking about. Within days of learning something new, people often forget it, right? But we've got to get some tricks to fight back. Reinforcement learning. So short quizzes, micro learning sessions, post-training stuff like that helps keep the knowledge fresh. So again, my example of LinkedIn profiles, there was no follow-up by the leadership on that. Like, how's it going this week? Just want to check in every week. How are people doing? What's the barriers you're getting? None of that reinforcement. They just trained them on it and then leaned back, went to do some other stuff. Of course, there's other business to be done, but nobody took ownership of making sure that that stuck. So just-in-time learning is what I like to call it. Make sure your sellers can access the content, right? So if you're using a Teams or a Zoom or however you organize your sales calls, create a video of that one little thing and post it in a location that everybody can do it. And then, of course, you can use very simple tools like just a refresher, write a little email. How you doing this week? Here's a refresher of what we covered last week. Keep up the coaching and maybe even put it in your kind of community, so to speak, your asynchronous community for your sellers. So people can do peer learning and just do regular check-ins. That goes a long way to reinforce what they've learned. You're always going to have people on the team that have not just revenue-based incentives, I like to call contribution-based incentives. And you should make that part of the learning plan. Technical sellers have to not just show the stuff and close business, they have to become good at teaching. And so who's better to teach? You have to teach. How about teach your team? And so teach your team what you've learned. That's part of the whole technical sales component for folks is when you get into kind of the solution selling model, you want to teach your customers and prospects something new, something of value. So this is a good way to practice and build and reinforce that skill. Now, how do you measure out ROI? So hopefully that makes sense to everybody. Finally, how do we measure our ROI, whether this is an effort is paying off or so how do we track it? Well, first, it doesn't have to be that complicated. Set clear, quantifiable goals. Think of conversion rates, deal size, customer satisfaction scores. In my LinkedIn profile, it might be update skill set. I might want to say, hey, I want to see who added new contacts into their thing, and I want you to report once a week back in the spreadsheet. Something similar. And I can put up a simple dashboard for that. So you don't have to make it super complicated to keep track of this. These also numbers that we talked about, like deal size or customer satisfaction scores or conversion rates, those are all things that got impacted by some level of training. So just don't look at it as sales performance, so to speak, but it's really measuring behavioral changes. How often are reps using the tactics and tools they've learned? So the other way to do this is through surveys and self-assessments and client feedback. That can give you actually a better picture often. Some people just love to win the game, so they'll go in and make up data sometimes or just do the busy work in order to win the prize. So getting that feedback too is a helpful thing. Now, no training is completed without closing the loop. Follow up, gather feedback, and keep iterating. That goal is really continuous improvement. It's one thing to train on a very particular skill. I need you to go into the CRM system and create new opportunities and rejigger those. Or I want you to put in more notes or something like that. Like those are tools that you can do, but the most valuable knowledge isn't what you teach, it's what they remember and what they apply. So get that training aligned with the outcomes and benefits. If you do these things, we know better close rates happen. If you do these things, I don't have to talk to you and interrupt during the day about where the deal is because you're up to date on the deal. So your training can stick and you can deliver those results that you're looking for. So that's a good set of tips on how to get that training to stick. Thanks. Have a great day.